I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Well, what a week it's been, huh? Full of sunshine and earlier in the week, record heat. At my house, 3 different portable air conditioners were cranked overnight in the bedrooms, fighting to keep things comfortable, which made me think about electricity and, frankly, how much it's going to cost. But besides that, about how much we have in the Northwest and how it's being used and where things go from here. Electricity, that's our big story tonight. Whatever you're using to view this newscast, whether it's live or later, you can thank electricity for powering it or charging its battery. Without electricity, we'd all be in a world of hurt. Just ask the folks in Houston who are suffering with the damaged power system there in sweltering heat. Electricity use is growing significantly in the Northwest. It's something we need to keep an eye on. Now, before we get too deep into the weeds here, let's make sure that we all understand one term: megawatt. You're going to hear that a lot in the electrical world, and you'll hear it a lot tonight. It's a common measurement for electrical power. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council says 1 megawatt can power about 796 homes in the Northwest for an entire year. Right now, the council reports the Northwest will use about 22,000 megawatts for the year of 2024. That's enough for roughly 17,500,000 homes. But of course, it's not just homes using electricity these days. We also have to think about electric cars and data centers. And those are forecast to grow quite a bit over the next 5 years, especially the data centers. Here's a projection from the Chelan PUD offered up at a BPA meeting this spring. It's forecasting that the need for electricity will shoot up dramatically in 2026. See that hockey stick there? Mostly it's going to go up from things like server farms and data centers. The overall forecast for tech load looks like this, with the power demand possibly jumping from around 1,500 megawatts up to as high as 8,000 megawatts over the next 5 years. That 8,000 is the amount of power it takes to run about 6.4 million homes a year. So, yeah, it's a big deal. Electric cars, by the way, are not a big deal in terms of electric use right now, but in 5 years, the Power and Conservation Council thinks it could grow to 1,000 megawatts, about 4% of the overall regional demand. Which brings up the question, can the region keep up? The folks in charge certainly hope so, and one way the big power companies are already working toward that are programs called peak rebate or smart thermostat or other similar terms. It happens when PGE or Pacific Power or others ask customers to ease up just a bit, don't run your air conditioners quite as hard, and use a little less power. Here's a look at how it went for PGE on July 8th. They asked customers to ease up around 5 o'clock this past Monday when temperatures hit 102. CEO Maria Pope said customers moving the thermostat just a little bit or letting PGE do it for them cut power use by 109 megawatts, which we know from our earlier math example is enough to run 87,000 homes for a year. And it certainly helped the utility get through a peak event. Now, the graph does show that the power drifted back up the rest of the evening, but you know, every little bit helps, and it shows that customers can have a significant impact on power use. Now, as smart people think about the future, with the growing demand for electricity from data centers and the shutting off of coal plants in the West that make electricity, which, by the way, is happening and is great for the environment, then other parts of the system become very important. Things like transmission. Nicole Hughes is the CEO of Renewable Northwest. That's a 4-state clean energy advocacy group that's working to decarbonize the electric grid. I recently talked with her about the ability of different areas of the West to share electricity, sending it to where it's needed when they have extra. It's a bit technical, but I know you will follow our discussion here.
An average wind farm in the Columbia River Gorge is about 100 megawatts. And, you know, solar projects, a large commercial solar project is roughly around 100 megawatts. And California is exporting about 6,000 megawatts a day. So that could be upwards of, 5 to 10 commercial generation facilities that are exporting their power out of the state of California and being used by other states. The mechanism that allows that to happen is called the energy imbalance market. That's a market that was established in the early 2000s, and it is being used by utilities that serve customers all across the region, including here in Oregon. And it does its job. It dispatches the least cost resource when it's needed the most. Now, There are ways that we can improve that process, and California Independent System Operator has created a day-ahead market, which now lets us do that transaction quicker. Ultimately, the best we could get from this mechanism here of trading excess energy is to create what's called a full regional transmission organization, where we have access to this generation across a diverse footprint all across the West. So that's what we're leading towards, but we're not quite there yet.
And that sounds good in theory, but is there enough bandwidth on the lines? That's probably not the right term, but can the lines move all that energy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Transmission capacity constraints are becoming like the pacing item for us here, meeting our decarbonization goals. We do not have enough transmission right now in the region to meet our clean energy goals. We need to build new transmission, and we need to learn how to use our existing transmission more efficiently.
Okay. That doesn't sound all that hopeful, because I think one of the big utilities, maybe it's Pacific Core, has been trying to build new transmission lines for something like 10 years, and I don't think they've even broken ground yet.
Yeah, the last transmission line that was approved in our region is the Boardman to Hemingway project, which is an Idaho Power and Pacific Core partnership. The project hasn't started construction yet, but it would take about 20 years from the time that they started that project until when it's going to get built.
So a bit of a lag there. Okay, she's talking about two things there. One is a market where energy traders can buy and sell based on what they're going to need the next day or days and buy that electricity from all over the West. The other issue, though, is how to get it there. As more and more electricity is needed, the power lines can get congested, almost like a freeway. So bigger lines that can handle more electricity are needed too. And that, as we just heard, is a very slow process. Something you to think about the next time you turn on the lights or the air conditioner. And that brings us to a special report from our friends at NBC News this week, showing how California is actually having to dump or waste solar power because they're getting too much of it at the wrong time of day, and they don't have any way to ship it off or to store it. Liz Kreutz reports.
Across California, it's a common sight, rows of suburban homes topped with solar panels. But as the state works towards its ambitious clean energy vision, an almost counterintuitive problem has emerged. California is at times generating too much solar, meaning loads of good clean energy is going to waste.
Since solar power relies on the sun, it's often the middle of the day on days when it's not too hot that you can run into this issue of essentially having too much solar. People aren't home, they're not running their ACs, and the system can generate more than the state can use.
This imbalance has been dubbed the duck curve. Its belly, the time of day when solar production can exceed demand.
So that's the duck curve?
That's the duck curve. Yeah, there it is.
Inside California's independent grid operator, CEO Elliot Mainzer showed us how they manage the state's electricity in real time.
There is solar energy right now that's essentially being thrown away.
You know, the bottom line is that there are times when we do not have the demand for electricity for the full production of the solar fleet. Sometimes we're able to export it, and there are those times under certain extreme conditions when we do have to curtail it.
When you say curtail, you mean throwing it away?
We say sending dispatch instructions to those fleets to reduce their generation, yes.
In recent years, the amount of renewable energy curtailed, most of it solar, has skyrocketed, both from oversupply and so-called congestion, when there's more electricity than the transmission lines in some areas can handle. So far this year, the state has already lost out on nearly 2.6 million megawatt hours of renewable electricity, more than enough to power all the households in San Francisco for a year. To solve the problem, Governor Gavin Newsom's administration has been pushing to add more batteries to store that excess energy. And state regulators have taken a more controversial approach, drastically cutting financial incentives for homeowners looking to install solar.
Before, we used to have people clamoring to put solar on.
Ed Murray, who operates Aztec Solar outside Sacramento, says the impact has been devastating for his business. He's laid off 10 employees over the last year.
We were left figuring out what do we do now?
Since the changes, there's been a 66% drop in residential solar installations and an estimated 17,000 green jobs lost statewide. To make it cost-effective, homeowners now need to install batteries in addition to solar panels. but that can cost an additional $10,000 to $20,000 or more. In a statement, Governor Newsom defended the state's policies, saying in part, no other state in America comes close to California's solar production. And now we're adding more batteries faster than ever to help capture that energy to use at night.
Do you think California will be able to meet its 2045 clean energy goal?
Absolutely not. No way we're going to get there without rooftop solar.
New challenges casting a shadow on the path to a renewable future. Liz Kreutz, NBC News, Folsom, California.
Interesting stuff. Now to a major announcement from the federal government regarding the I-5 bridge replacement project between Portland and Vancouver. The IBR team got $1.5 billion in new federal money today. Yes, billion with a B. It's the biggest federal transportation funding awarded in Washington state history, according to the Senators Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray. The money comes from the appropriately named Bridge Investment Program, which is one of the pieces of President Biden's $1 trillion infrastructure package that Congress passed back in 2021. That bill also created the federal mega grant program, which handed the Interstate Bridge project $600 million late last year, so it's starting to add up. In both cases, the project received essentially the entire amount of funding that they'd applied for. If you've been wondering whether this thing is ever actually going to be built, Program Administrator Greg Johnson says today's grant in particular is a very good sign.
I think this is, once again, an indication of the confidence that our federal partners have in the program, that we're doing the right things, that we are approaching this in the right way. I think that's the most important takeaway from getting a grant this large, is that we have a unified region that says it's time to stop talking about this project, time to start getting it done.
All right, so how much money does the project actually have lined up at this point, and how much more do they need? Well, here's where things stand. Back in January 2023, the project team published a financial plan that listed the total cost at somewhere between $5 and $7.5 billion, with a target of about $6 billion. That's the cost to not only replace the bridge, by the way, but also to extend light rail to Vancouver and upgrade several miles of the freeway to the north and south of the bridge. The plan envisions splitting that bill four ways: $1 billion from Oregon, $1 billion from Washington, at least $2.5 billion from the federal government, and the remainder from you in the form of tolls, at least $1 billion there. Oh yeah, tolls are still coming. Today's grant award does not change that. Oregon and Washington have each put up their $1 billion, and the two states have a committee now set up to plan out the tolling program. On the federal side, the plan was to split that $2.5 billion between three different programs: a mega grant, bridge investment, and something called the Capital Investment Grants New Starts program, which is meant for public transportation projects. The goal was to get $1.5 billion from the first two programs combined, and then another $1 billion from New Starts. They still haven't applied to the New Starts, but today's announcement brings the total for the first two grants to $2.1 billion. So, you know, financially, if you're keeping up, they're actually ahead of schedule. So, does this mean they'll be asking for less money from the New Starts program? Well, no. According to Johnson, they'll still be asking for $1 billion, but there's some good reasons for that. First of all, just because all three grants come from the federal government does not mean that they can be treated as a single pot of money.
With the transit piece, certain dollars can only be used for certain aspects of the project. And so this $1.5 billion cannot be utilized for the transit portion of the project. So we will still be looking for those federal transit dollars to complete the transit portion of the funding.
In other words, the bridge money has to go to the bridge, and the light rail money has to go to light rail. And by the way, that light rail portion, it's expected to cost at least $1.3 billion. So they need as much light rail money as they can get. On the bridge side, these grants may put them ahead of the game based on the $6 billion price tag from January 2023. But, you know, come on. If we've learned anything from these monster projects, there is no way that's the final price.
Right now, that is our best estimate. But we recognize, since we performed that work back in 2022, that we have seen inflation in the construction markets just exceed what anyone could have predicted.
All right, so what's the new damage? Well, according to Johnson, they don't exactly know yet. There's an updated cost estimate in the works, but we probably won't see it for another year because of the ongoing federal environmental review process of bridge designs. That is supposed to be done early next year. And by that time, the design will have been pared down to a single version, and that's the version the team wants to use for the next cost estimate. So great news in regards to more federal funds today, but the total cost for the project is still very fluid, and it won't even be estimated until sometime in 2025. The next step for the project later this year is to gather public feedback. I know you want to say a lot about that. We'll be sure to let you know when that opens up. In the meantime, you can talk to us right now. Feel free to fire away your feedback on the bridge project. You know the drill. Email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. In the meantime, up next on The Story, we're hearing from a few more Oregon Democrats on where they stand on the debate over President Biden's candidacy. And I'll show you some political gamesmanship from Senator Ron Wyden on the issue that we caught up with today. That's coming up next when The Story returns. Plans for an around-the-clock sobering center in Multnomah County have been pushed back. Now the facility won't be open until the fall of 2026. The long-awaited sobering center is meant to be a place where police or medics can take people under the influence of drugs or alcohol to sober up. They can stay there for 72 hours. Plans for the sobering center are being set aside for the moment so that the county can focus on a temporary deflection center. That'll be a place where the police can take people caught with drugs and try to get them help. It's part of the county's plan to deal with the rollback of Measure 110, helping steer drug users away from jail and into treatment. It's set to open September 1st, but Portland has not had a round-the-clock sobering center since the nonprofit Central City Concern shut down its facility in 2019.
I think that they definitely should open something up like that, and soon. People are in desperate need. There's people dying. Like, I'm a recovering drug addict, and people forcing me to get sober saved my life.
Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson explained about 10 sobering beds will open in the spring of next year. Then the 24/7 sobering center will open a year and a half later in the fall of 2026. Portland's Metro Chamber, representing businesses, does not like that plan at all. Instead, they argue the deflection center and the sobering center should be ready to go at the same time. Moving now to politics. New reaction today from Oregon Democrats when it comes to President Joe Biden's future as the Democratic nominee. Congresswoman Andrea Salinas and congressional candidate Janelle Bynum both gave us statements today. Neither of them really took a side on the issue. They mostly dodged the question. But we did catch up with Senator Ron Wyden in Northeast Portland today. He was asked directly if he thinks the president should continue his bid for re-election.
Look, the lay of the land right now is the president is running. The president reinforced that last night. So there's a lot of speculation about various ideas and the like, but that's the fact.
Senator Wyden, how's that for a good pivot? Very good, I'd say. Here's another example. The same reporter reminded the senator that he has said the physical fitness of both presidential candidates should be evaluated by every voter, and then asked Wyden how he would evaluate the president's physical fitness now.
What I recommended to the Biden administration and have reinforced it more recently is there is no substitute, none, for direct candidate voter back and forth, unscripted, moments. And the president happens to be very good at it.
And this senator happens to be very good at dodging our questions. He answered a totally different question there. And here's just one more, because I just can't get enough of Senator Wyden tonight. I mean, I'm truly a fan, even though we are kind of giving him a hard time, I know. But he's also tough enough that we can call him out when he twists questions into answers that he wants and not what we asked. Check this next one out. He was asked to confirm that he would not follow other politicians telling the president to get out of the race. Listen to what he said.
But the president reinforced last night that he was running. When somebody does that, I say, what does it mean for Oregonians? What it means for Oregonians, for example, is we build on some of the major changes that I described getting in 2021 and 2022. Let me make some news for you. One of the big efforts that we will make in healthcare in 2025, and I've been talking to both Democrats and Republicans about leading it. I'm prepared to do that. We're going to spend about $4 trillion a year on healthcare in America. Increasingly, you have middlemen taking bigger and bigger chunks of that out. Now, the Senate Finance Committee, which I chair, has passed my bill to go after these pharmaceutical benefit managers who are middlemen. But there's a lot more to do. And so when I hear, for example, as I did last night, the president say, I'm running, period, I'm in, I say, we're ready to go on the next big step in holding down healthcare costs, which is reining in these middlemen who've basically gotten a free ride at the expense of Oregonians.
Yes, bravo, sir. Bravo, I say. It has been quite a while, but we just had to award Senator Wyden the Pivot of the Month award, deftly deflecting and pivoting and not answering a single question put to him on whether he thinks the president should stay or go. Well done, sir. Very impressive. We do try to have a little fun on this show, despite all the serious topics we cover every night. And, call people out every once in a while. Keep it right here. We're back with the final word right after this. A traffic alert reminder for you. A 5-mile stretch of I-84 in both directions in Portland will be shut down this weekend. It's starting at 11 o'clock on Saturday night, lasting until noon Sunday. It goes from I-5 all the way down to I-205. The goal is to clean up graffiti and trash with some ODOT maintenance happening along the way. TriMet will also be shutting down MAX service in the area and using shuttle buses instead. They expect to resume regular MAX service Sunday evening around 6 p.m. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember the story, our collective story? Well, that never ends. A programming note for you, by the way. NBC News is going to be airing a special one-on-one interview between Lester Holt and President Joe Biden on Monday at 6 o'clock. That will be followed by coverage from the Republican National Convention. And that means our show is getting bumped way late to 9:30 p.m. Monday night. I'm going to take a nap. I hope that you'll join us then. We're going to have a special one-on-one segment of my own to bring you that night. Enjoy your weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday night at 9:30.